Hi everyone, thank you for checking in to this talk at the open sessions for the joint session of 2021. This talk is titled Propositions and Their Truth Conditions, and it's about structured propositions, and specifically the question whether philosophers who think that propositions are structured also have to take their truth conditions to be derived from more basic facts, in particular facts about the constituents of propositions. So I'm going to use these pointy brackets around sentences to abbreviate the proposition that, basically. So this first sentence reads, the proposition that Socrates is wise is true just in case Socrates is wise. Let's say that this sentence expresses a T fact. So my main claim will be that propositions are structured, but nevertheless T facts are fundamental. That is, they're not grounded in other facts. For example, facts about the constituents of the proposition in question. It's typically assumed, on the contrary, that if propositions are structured, then T-facts must be grounded in facts about propositional constituents. But if T-facts are fundamental, as I'm claiming, then this explanatory constraint is misplaced. So in my view, statements of truth conditions of propositions need not be derived in some non-trivial way from the theory of propositions. They could just be derived, for example, from an axiom like A at the bottom here, which is a propositionally quantified formula. For all P, the proposition that P is true just in case P. Why would one want to hold this combination of views? That is, that propositions are structured, but that T facts, facts about their truth conditions, are fundamental, or at least very trivially grounded in something like the axiom A. Well, Peter Pagin has produced a Banasser-style argument against the very idea of structured propositions, which goes as follows. So he thinks the proposition that RAB, kind of relational proposition, can be identified with either of two structures in which the constituents, as you can see, come in different orders. So it can be seen as a structure referred to as P of R hood, the relation, and A and B in that order, or as a structure referred to as P prime of R hood B and A, where B and A come in a different order, as you can see. Now, if truth conditions of propositions have to be derived from the theory of propositions, then we will have two different choices, two different functions, f and f prime, such that f of the first structure, P of R hood A and B, is the set of worlds in which RAB. So here I'm talking about the set of worlds as a way of referring to the truth conditions, basically. And secondly, we have the option of taking rather the privileged function to be f prime, such that f prime of P prime of R hood B and A is also the set of worlds in which RAB. And according to Pagin, we can't choose non-arbitrarily between these two theories, the ones positing the one kind of structure and the first function f, or the other kind of structure and the other function f prime. So both hypotheses are untenable if we follow standard Banasser reasoning, on which if you can't non-arbitrarily choose between two theories, then both are untenable. So my response to this objection against the idea that propositions are structured is that we simply don't need to posit any such function from structured propositions to truth conditions. Rather, we can simply infer from the theory statements of truth conditions from a simple axiom like A. And this goes in tandem with the idea that T-facts are fundamental, right? Or if they're grounded in a very trivial way from an axiom like A, or the fact expressed by that axiom, rather. So this is a reason for adherents of structured propositions to take T-facts as fundamental, or at least to take them to have a very trivial kind of grounding. For example, if they're grounded in the axiom A. Now, an obvious objection to this idea is that if we take propositions to be structured, then surely what truth conditions they have to depend on facts about its constituents, and thus T-facts can't be fundamental. There are two replies to this objection. First of all, we can simply take the dependency to be of a non-grounding type, and thus harmless for the view that I'm defending here. So we could take the dependency to be a matter of counterfactuals holding. This means that whether X, a proposition, is true, just in case f of A, that will depend on whether X has fness as a constituent, but only in the sense that had X not had fness as a part, it wouldn't have had those truth conditions. But that counterfactual holding is consistent with taking this T-fact to be fundamental. The second reply, which I think is more interesting, actually grants that T-facts are grounded in facts about constituents, but takes them to be grounded only in a trivial way. This is not the kind of trivial grounding I just discussed, where a T-fact is grounded in an axiom like A, but rather a different kind of grounding where the proposition is referred to as a structured entity. So consider the following kind of claim. P of R hood A and B is true just in case R A B. Let's call the facts expressed by this form of sentence a structured T-fact. So the difference is that the proposition is referred to here by a kind of structural description rather than by a that clause. Now we can take these structured T-facts to be grounded in a sense, and even grounded in facts about constituents, but still in a way that is relatively trivial. And the idea is that we can take these structured T-facts to be derivable simply from the axiom A plus an identity claim, like the following. The proposition that RAB is identical to P of R hood and A and B, in that order. And the relevant grounding claim then will be the following. So the structured T-fact at the top here, P of R hood A and B is true just in case R and B. This is grounded by the following conjunction. First of all, an instance of the axiom A, the proposition that RAB is true just in case R and B, and secondly, this identity claim that the proposition that RAB is identical to P of R hood A and B, this kind of structured entity. If we adopt this kind of view, then we can firstly accommodate the intuition that truth conditions of propositions depend in a grounding sense on facts about the proposition's constituents, and we can nevertheless respond to Pagin's argument because we can still derive the statements of truth conditions, or the T sentences for propositions, in a relatively trivial way and without having to posit any privileged function from structures to truth conditions. Are there any positive reasons for taking T-facts to be fundamental? Well, in my view, it's simply intuitive that they are. And it's been held to be intuitive in the literature on properties that the similar equivalence claim about properties, that is, A is F just in case A has the property of being F, is fundamental. Secondly, another reason for taking T facts to be fundamental is that T sentences that express these facts are strongly analytic. I'm going to define that in a moment. And the assumption that strongly analytic sentences express fundamental facts. This is, of course, not to say that the facts are fundamental because they are expressed by analytic sentences. I mean, the fundamentality of facts is surely independent of our linguistic practices, but nevertheless, this claim is true. And what does strongly analytic mean? I define it like this. S is strongly analytic just in case S instantiates a schema, sigma, such that for some expression E in S, understanding E consists in a disposition to accept all instances of sigma. It's of course controversial to say that there are any strongly analytic sentences in this sense, but this is how I would like to define it anyway. Now, true is such that understanding it consists in a disposition to accept all instances of T. That's something I'm simply assuming here. Where the schema T reads the proposition that P is true just in case P. This means that T sentences will be strongly analytic and therefore they express fundamental facts. In other words, T facts are fundamental. So let's just briefly say something about how this affects the question of the truth conditions of sentences. So there's an analogous constraint on theories of meaning, analogous, that is, to the constraint on theories of propositions, of deriving statements of truth conditions from claims about their constituents. That is a constraint that I reject. So something analogous happens in the case of theories of meaning, where the constraint reads, an account of the meaning of sentences must explain why they have the truth conditions they have. And this will be explained by reference to semantic axioms concerning primitive words. But if T facts are fundamental, and we take a sentence to be true just in case it expresses a true proposition, which is natural if we assume propositions and that they are the primary truth bearers, well, then we can trivially derive also the truth conditions of sentences. And the explanation will be on the following lines. The proposition that P is true just in case P, this is from the axiom A. S expresses the proposition P. This is something that will have some kind of independent explanation in our theory of meaning. And from these two claims, we can simply derive S is true just in case P. So it will be a relatively trivial matter to explain or derive statements of truth conditions of sentences. Now, there is an influential argument due to Merrick to the effect that if propositions are structured, then T facts must be grounded in facts about propositional constituents. So that is, of course, the claim that I'm rejecting here. So let's have a look at this argument and see what could be said in response to it. His argument is basically that if this would not be true, if propositions are structured, yet their truth conditions are fundamental in the sense that the fact that a given proposition has the truth conditions it has is fundamental, then it would be a sheer coincidence that the truth conditions of propositions line up with their constituents in the way they do. Actually, Merrick's argument has to do with propositions representing things to be so and so, rather than being true just in case so and so. But I'm going to discuss a version of the argument that has to do with truth conditions rather than representing. I think they amount to basically the same thing. So the idea is as follows, to concretize. The proposition that Socrates is wise is true just in case Socrates is wise. But that proposition also has the constituents Socrates and wisdom. So its truth conditions concern precisely those entities that are its constituents. But this coincidence, so to speak, can't be a brute fact. It has to be explained. In a nutshell, that is his argument, and this is why, according to him, you can't take propositions to be structured and yet take truth conditions or propositions to be fundamental or primitive. And my response is quite simply that this coincidence can be explained. It's just that it will be explained in a way, in a different way from what Merrick probably thought is required by an explanation of this kind. So here's how I think this fact can be explained. That is, the fact that the truth conditions of propositions kind of match the constituents or concern the constituents in this orderly way. So first we have simply the axiom A. For all P, the proposition that P is true just in case P. Secondly, we have the assumption C. The proposition that Socrates is wise has Socrates and wisdom as its constituents. I'm not going to take a stand on the grounding status of that claim. It's just a claim that we take to be true. Now from A we can, of course, derive the instance, the proposition that Socrates is wise is true just in case Socrates is wise. And given a similar axiom schema to A, but concerning properties instead, we can derive from AI, the instance of A, that Socrates is wise just in case Socrates has wisdom. So the explanation now follows from these two claims, C and star, because from them we can simply infer that Socrates is wise. The proposition that Socrates is wise is true just in case one of its constituents has the other constituent. But Socrates and wisdom were arbitrarily chosen here. So for that reason we can infer the generalization. A simple subject-predicate proposition is true just in case one of its constituents has the other. And this, in my view, counts as a good explanation of why the truth conditions of propositions kind of line up with their constituents. I'm sure Merrick and others would want to object in probably many ways against this explanation, but I think in the end that it holds and it works. So that was all from me. Thank you very much for listening, and I'm looking forward to your comments on this. Thanks.